Howdy. Well, good morning. How many of you in this room today that are students, would you rather be here or would you rather be at school in the classroom? That's what I thought. And the teachers, right to the gut. Sorry about that. And guys, I will tell you, it is an honor to have you at the Bush Library today for this program. This is the 10th year of the Reading Discovery Program. And just a couple of things before we bring on the folks that will be participating in today's program. I know that at your age you may not fully understand how great it is to live in a community that has a presidential library. There just aren't that many in the United States. And through the years, there haven't been that many people, that many kids or students who have actually attended this program because this is in its 10th year. So over the years, 6,000 people or so may seem like a lot, but when you divide it to 10, it's only 600 a year that get to attend this locally. So we are honored that you are here at the Bush Presidential Library. It is our hope that as you grow up, as you have families of your own, that you will help to preserve the history and the impact that the Bush family made on America in general, and will make this library a place that you know you are always welcome. We have a fun program today, and I got to tell you, we need to practice one thing. I'm going to take a little liberty on the script today because later on we're going to go live where schools from throughout Texas and I believe Canada today will be able to ask a question of our panelists that are up here that you'll meet in just a few moments from now. So when we greet them, I know some of you may not everybody be Aggies that are in the room, but the big thing we say in town is usually howdy. So when you know that you're live, when the rest of Texas in classrooms everywhere and in Canada are speaking or are live with you, I need you to say a big old howdy to them to let them know that you welcome them in to College Station, Texas, home of the Bush Library. Let's practice our best howdy when you see yourselves on the screen later on. So let's practice that on a count of 3. Give me a big howdy back. 1, 2, 3. Howdy! That's it. All right, so we thank you very much. And teachers, I will ask you, administrators that are here, are the kids usually this quiet and well-behaved all the time? Is this how it is in real life? I didn't think so. All right. I do tell you, though, while you're here in this library in this event today, I'm honored that you're here, and this is a great group, and we ask that you pay special attention because you will learn something along the way. I do welcome you to the 10th Annual Reading Discovery Distance Learning Program and Video Conference. This is a program of the Education Department of the George Bush Presidential Library and Museum, which is part of the National Archives and Records Administration. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Mike Wright. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of TV stations KWTX in Waco and KBTX in Bryan College Station. The reason we are here today is because of Mrs. Bush's love for literacy leadership. Our purpose is to enjoy reading activities while you learn more. Today's program introduces the value of friendships and personal diplomacy. Technology makes possible exciting new ways to learn and to have interactive reading experiences. Our new interactive learning game app is the White House Dinner Dash. We're going to talk about that later on today. So please, after this program is over, feel free to get the free download online, and the website for this that we will remind you of, your teachers will have the information as well, is whitehousedinnerdash.com. You can get it also in Google Play or at the Apple Store. Today, our reading buddies will play it for you. Your reading buddies could be your friends, your parents, your grandparents, or even your pets. We appreciate the help of the program's sponsor. I'd like to ask if they stand and be recognized as we call their names out. First of all, David Jones is the Chief Executive Officer of the George Bush Presidential Library Foundation. David, if you'd please stand and be recognized wherever you are. Is David walking out the side door? Here he is. David, thanks for the support of the foundation. We talked about the app just a minute ago, and the White House, the developer actually of the White House Dinner Dash is with us today. He's going to talk about it a bit. We're honored to have him today, and he's free to answer any questions later, of course. But David Schaller is here today. David Schaller, EduWeb Principal, is also here. David, thank you for being here. It's not often that you really get to meet an app developer, but that's the guy that came up with it right there. We do thank you for all the research, the art, the graphics work designed to develop the 2017 Reading Discovery app. Thank you to the Bryan ISD administrators who are here today. We're glad you are here. We appreciate all of you. Would like to acknowledge several, and please hold your applause until we acknowledge all of them. If you will, please stand and remain standing until we have a chance to say thank you. First of all, Bryan ISD Interim Superintendent Dr. Timothy Roque, Assistant Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Elementary, Jolynn Bricker, Henderson Elementary School Principal Danielle Legg, and Houston Elementary School Principal Susan Finch. We thank you very much for being here today. Let's give them a round of applause. Let me just check. How many from Henderson Elementary are in the house today? Where are you today? All right, very nice. That's a pretty good response. Let's see now who we have here from Houston Elementary. Who's in the house? All right. It's an honor to have you guys joining us today. The 2017 Reading Discovery Program has student readers participating through what's called Connect to Texas. It's a live streaming that we're helping provide through KBTX and the Discovery Education Network today. We thank you very much to all the distance learning specialists working to make our connections who are watching from all the different parts of the world today. Brayley Morris at Texas A&M University's Trans-Texas Video Conference Network, and Lori Hamnecker, Pat Smuck, and Pat Nevin of Region 11 Education Service Centers Connect to Texas. The Education Department here would also like to thank Josh Gorbett, the News Director, and Kewan Brown, News Operations Manager at KBTX, for live streaming and archiving this program. Also, a special thanks to Aggie Alves, Discovery Education Vice President of Marketing, for organizing their collaboration. We appreciate and honor First Lady Barbara Bush's legacy and her support of the cause of reading. At this time, it's with great privilege and pleasure to introduce to you Neil Bush, who is the son of President and Mrs. Bush, and our panelist who will participate today. Let's come on and make ourselves to the podium. Everybody just come on. Let's go. They're not all in yet. Keep applauding. It would be good that you keep, yeah, give them more. There you go. All right. All right, very nice. Mr. Bush is the chairman of Points of Light. It's an international nonprofit that works to increase volunteerism in the world. He and his wife, Maria Bush, are the co-chairs of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation. At this time, Neil Bush will share his insights about our topic and how much President and Mrs. Bush felt personal diplomacy and friendships mattered for making good relationships between countries. Please make welcome to the podium today, Mr. Neil Bush.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome you all to this auditorium and tell you it is such a great honor for me to be substituting for the First Lady of Literacy, one of the greatest First Ladies of the United States, for my mother, who wishes she could be here with you today and has participated in this event for many years. And I saw her yesterday, and she wanted me to pass on her greatest admiration and respect to Shirley Hammond and to everyone who has played a role in making this event successful. It's very exciting because we're going to be connecting via the internet to students from all over the world, and my mom views this as one of the highlights of her year every year. So it's an honor for me to substitute for her, and I'm not qualified to do so. The topic of which many of you have been assigned to read and to think about is diplomacy. I looked up diplomacy while I was sitting in the parking lot here. I got here a little early, and the definition is the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way. You think of diplomacy in the international context, and I can't think of a more effective diplomat than my father, George Herbert Walker Bush. You guys weren't even close to being born when he served as President of the United States, but history is going to write about his experiences as the chief liaison officer in China when China was a very poor country struggling to find its way. My father served as the U.S. representative there, and he learned diplomatic skills of being sensitive to other people's cultures and other people's ways of doing things. He became the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and worked with diplomats from all over the world, from every different part of the world, and learned from that experience that there are people who have different ways of living and different ways of governing themselves and different ways of going about their daily lives. And so he learned how to be sensitive in a cultural way. He became vice president and then president of the United States. My father's success as president will go down in history as being truly remarkable. And his greatest success weren't the accomplishments, and there are many, many accomplishments, but was the style with which he exercised his power. Not just power of diplomacy on the international front, but also working with the people he worked with in the Congress. And this is true of any kid. Diplomacy doesn't just mean, working with ambassadors from different countries. It means trying to be sensitive to your classmates, trying to be sensitive to your teachers, trying to be sensitive and effective in working with other people. And I'm sure you can think of many, many examples in your own lives of where, because you took a little time to listen, because you were empathetic and caring about what your friend was feeling after something they went through was very difficult. I bet you can think of many examples where people follow the person who is the best people person, who is more compassionate, more sensitive to others. And so that's the lesson I've learned from my father, that if you listen to other people, if you're caring and respectful of other cultures, if you're not judgmental, if you don't put other people down because they don't do things exactly the way you may do them, but rather you try to listen and understand those differences, then you can be an effective leader, and the world will be a much better and more harmonious place. So I urge all of you to practice diplomacy, to practice the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way. And I appreciate very much you're here. I would be remiss if I didn't throw in a plug for literacy. My mother, and we're here because of literacy. We're here because my mother believes that you can't possibly realize your fullest God-given potential. She believes that every child, every human is born with this great gift to be productive and to be civilized and to be successful in their lives, but you can't realize the fullest gift unless you read at an age-appropriate level all your life. And so if you develop a love for reading, if you read what your teachers assign you, if you read outside of school things you care about, who cares about stuff in here? I'm going to take one more minute. What kinds of things do you guys care about? Let me see the guys in the blue shirts, somebody in the blue shirt. What kinds of things do you care about? What's fun for you? The one I can't see. Yeah, stand up, please. Yes, and say, what's your name first? I'm Jackson Reese. Hey, Jackson. What do you like? What do you like? Do you? I bet you can find a gazillion books. You can sit down now, Jackson. I bet you can find a gazillion books about playing outside and having fun with your brothers. Who likes dogs here and cats and pets? I bet you can find a gazillion books about dogs and pets and cats. Who likes sports? Anybody like basketball? You can find a million books about basketball. Who likes arts? And you can find books about everything that you like in life. And so I urge you, when you're at home, put aside the game that you play or some other activities that might be slightly really enjoyable and maybe slightly addictive but not that constructive, and pick up a good book and read about something you care about. If you develop a love for reading, and if reading becomes so easy for you that you don't have to even think about it, you will be successful in your life. No doubt about it. So I want to thank you for being here. I'm so proud to represent my mother, and thank you for being great readers.
Thanks, Neil. All right, thank you, Neil. All right, so this is the part of the program that's one of the most exciting. And remember, I told you that you're going to be broadcast throughout a number of different places. Let me tell you how many states you're going to be in, okay? It's going to be a question and answer session from some kids in other schools that are watching right this minute, from Houston to Dayton, Texas, which is not too far from Houston in southeast Texas, to the state of Arizona, to New Jersey, to Maine. It goes all the way up to the northeast. So we have a number of people that will be watching from all over the country today, and we're going to go live in just a second for this Reading Discovery Program favorite part of this conference. Let's take it to the Education Service Center Region 11. Mrs. Pam Nevin is standing by. She is going to be the moderator for the Q&A session as we visit schools. Mrs. Nevin, we did practice a bit earlier on what we were going to say since we know that these schools are watching across the country. So on the count of 3, we're going to say hello the way we do it in Aggie Land. You guys ready? Let's speak to them here. Mrs. Nevin, can we pop her up on the screen by any chance? If she is standing by so we know that she is on the other end here. There she is. Good morning, Mrs. Nevin. We can see you. So on the count of 3, let's tell them all what we say here. 1, 2, 3. And a big howdy to you, Pam. It's good to see you again, and it is now up to you to ask the questions and bring the other schools online as we're looking at our first class we're going to be visiting with today. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. The first school that we're going to connect to is the British International School from Houston, Texas. If you guys will go ahead and unmute your microphone, you guys can ask your questions.
We have some questions for Mr. Neil Bush. Where are the meetings held in the White House?
Hang on, Neil. Let me get the... it says, where are the meetings held in the White House?
There are so many places where meetings are held in the White House. The White House is one of the most spectacular buildings ever. Not just the official White House where the Oval Office is and the working part of the White House. The residence is special. I'll tell you a quick anecdote. So meetings are held everywhere. I've been reading to my mom and dad who've been in the hospital recently, and they're both doing really well, so I'm excited to report that. But I've been reading this fabulous book about 1880 when a president named James Garfield became president of the United States. He didn't seek the office. He was thrust into the office against his consent. He was assassinated, sadly, that same in 1981 when he was sworn after being sworn in. The conditions of the White House, as described in this book, it would make the White House unrecognizable. There was sewage everywhere. There was a swamp in Washington nearby where mosquitoes that carry disease were infecting people with malaria. The sanitation conditions of the White House were rats infested, so when they went to sleep at night, you could hear rats crawling around in the floors of the White House. And it's amazing what you can learn by reading, which is what I've taken away from this. My parents, who have lived in the White House and experienced everything under that roof, were so surprised to read of the conditions of the White House at the time. And even then, of just as meetings. This isn't a meeting, but the president at the time in 1881 was shot by a lunatic, by a guy that's insane. And instead of taking him to a hospital because the conditions were worse there, they took him to the White House and put him in a room. So meetings take place in different forms. They take place in every different kind of room. I'd highly recommend all of you guys at the British International School in Houston, all of you here in this auditorium, everyone listening, if you can go to the White House, take the tour. It is so special. Who's next?
How did your father, as the chief diplomat while president, find a topic to talk about which was beneficial but inoffensive?
Did you get it, Neil? Not quite. Okay, it says, how did your father as the chief diplomat while president find a topic to talk about which was beneficial but inoffensive?
Yeah.
Balance.
Yeah, I mean, being a great diplomat comes very naturally to my father. It's all about friendship. It's about making personal connections. And, my father, I'm sure, would use humor in part. I'm sure he would ask the diplomat he's working with, the world leader he's working with, the congressional leader he's working with, about his or her family. Are you married? Do you have kids? Compare notes. I mean, there's so many non-offensive ways that you can start a conversation, break the ice, and to warm up to discussions and negotiations with people. And my father is a naturally gifted diplomat in that sense. He's the most loving, caring, concerned. He loves everybody. He never judges anybody. He looks for the best in all of us. And I recommend that as a great strategy for each and every one of you. If you can just look at other people with respect, listen to them carefully, and try to find common interests with them, I guarantee you you'll have a much more successful relationship with those people. Okay. Who's next?
When diplomats need to use a translator, do you think anything gets lost in the translator?
Translation?
When diplomats need to use a translator, do you think anything gets lost in
You know, it's so funny. I was talking to Jim Baker, who was my dad's Secretary of State and had been a long-time buddy in the hospital, and I thought a question like this might come up, and I said, Jim, how would you answer this question? Do things get lost in translation? Yes. They do. People that have had a lot of experience. I traveled to China frequently for my own work in spreading good relations between the U.S. and China and for business. Definitely, if you have a translator that isn't an excellent translator, there's a lot that gets lost in translation. So you have to be really, really careful not to put too much weight on the translation and to look for great translation. There's no doubt about that. By the way, your school looks pretty amazing in the background.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's an incredible library you're looking over. Look at that building.
How much world culture does one need to know in order to be respectful always?
Okay, how much world culture does one need to know in order to be respectful always?
Gosh, I think it's so critical. You know, Americans that haven't traveled abroad, and it sounds like you're British, you're at a British school, so you've seen a lot of the world, it sounds like. But Americans that haven't traveled abroad think that every place else in the world should be or is like our part of the world. The fact is, if you go to the Middle East, that's a very tribal culture. I love going to different places because there's so much history that is built up and made different countries the way they are. China has a many thousand-year history that has been developed. They're a Han population, which means they're very monolithic. They're not nearly as diverse as we are here in America. And it's so critical that if you're going to do business with or negotiate treaties with or have any interaction with someone from a different country, you need to be sensitive to and try to become aware of the cultural differences. And the thing that makes America great, in my opinion, is that we are a blend of all the various cultures that have come together to make America what it is today. We are Americans, and we have an American culture, and clearly our culture influences the world, but our culture wouldn't be what it is without the influence of the immigrants that have come from Europe and from Asia and from South America, from all over the world. We are a great blend of cultures. Having said that, the cultural differences with people that are overseas are critical to understand and to be sensitive to be effective in dealing with people.
What is it like to talk to people based on your family's experience?
Okay, what is it like to talk with leaders from around the world based on your family's experiences?
You know, that's a good question. A lot of people ask me what it's like to be the son of a president, with the expectation that it might be different being the president of the son of a president than it would be to be the son of a normal person. I think dealing with foreign leaders is kind of the same answer. They're just human beings. You know, they're just people that put their pants on if they're men one leg at a time, and so it's not intimidating for my brother who was president, my father who was president, or for me that have had the privilege, I guess, of meeting foreign leaders. They're just human beings, and so it's really not that different honestly, for me to meet foreign leaders. Just like it was no different being raised in the family by a loving mother and a loving father who cared more about their kids than they cared about anything else they did. And we raised us in an environment that was safe, but allowed us to be curious. You know, so it was no different for me being raised by my parents as it is for many of you being raised by your parents. They were just normal parents, and world leaders are just normal people.
Tell it like it is, Neil.
Mr. Bush, Mrs. Susan Donius, and Mr. Patrick Benevish. How is an environment of trust created when talking to people?
I'm going to let you guys answer that. How's an environment of trust created by talking to people?
So,
You want to introduce yourself?
sure.
Yeah,
I think the young lady at the British School did as well. I'm Susan Donius. I'm the director of the Office of Presidential Libraries at the National Archives. So very happy to be here today. In response to the young lady's question, I think trust is really at the foundation of anything we do in our lives, whether it's, as Mr. Bush mentioned, as the former president engaged in diplomacy, whether it's us working with our colleagues as professionals, whether it's you working through issues with your teachers or with your friends. Trust is so critical and so important to be at that foundation, and it really is what you build, I think, and grow friendships based off of. So I think that whether it's a world leader or whether it's a friend on the playground, building that trust is the foundation of what will retain and build those relationships for years.
Absolutely. I don't know how much I can add. I'm Patrick Venabush. I'm with Discovery Education, and I'm very happy to be here today. I might add the word honesty to that response, that when you're interacting with other people, you're speaking the truth only, you're not telling fibs, and you be, as we use the word, transparent in the business world, that you let people know what you're thinking and you're not trying to hide anything from them. And I think that really develops that culture of trust, and you can have a great relationship as a result.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are now going to go to Liberty Elementary School in Arizona.
We have a couple of questions for Mrs. Susan Donius.
As a director of the... Oh, hi, my name is Luke. I'm 11 years old. As a director of the Presidential Libraries at the National Archives, what is the most important thing that you want children to learn and or experience when they visit a presidential library?
Oh, that's a great question, Luke. Thank you. I think what I would want young children who are visiting the libraries to remember or to learn from a visit is that they can get involved and they can be part of the democratic process at their local community level, at the national level, and at the international level. What matters is that each student, each young learner understands what's important to them, and that they can visit a library and see how each president had an inspiration or some life event that called them to public service. And I think that it's very fitting that we're doing this from the Bush Library, where President and Mrs. Bush and the entire Bush family have really emulated public service to the rest of us as citizens of this country. So I think as a student comes through, it's important to remember that public service is a very honorable calling, and that you can not only learn about the president's decision to go into public service, the background of his life, but also those initiatives that were important to him as president and how many carried on those traditions after they left office and, again, continued that life of public service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, my name's Tanner and I'm 11 years old. Why did you decide to become, can you tell us what the phrase diplomacy in presidential history means to you?
Sure. Thank you, Tanner. I think there are two parts to that question, or two answers to that question. I think diplomacy in presidential history relates to those actions by a former president to negotiate agreements, to work out resolutions, to come to terms in terms of issues that, or conflicts that we might be facing with another country. And I also think, related to that, diplomacy in presidential history also means how that president has approached those challenges and his personal skill and the diplomacy he used to engage in those conversations. So it's really both diplomacy as an outcome and an action of having something accomplished through that diplomacy, but also the personal diplomacy and the style of that president. And we see it throughout history with all of our leaders. So, thank you, Tanner.
Thank you.
Our next question is for Mr. Patrick Venabush.
Good morning, my name is Brown. Good morning, my name is Brown. What do you think is the way to use technology when teaching mathematics?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The question was, what's the best way to use technology when teaching mathematics? And this is what we're doing at Discovery Education, trying to build resources using technology to help teach kids math. I think one of the main ways that technology is being used right now is for basic skill practice. And in fact, that's what I see predominantly out in the schools. And I think that that's an effective use of technology, but I'd like to push us to think about some other ways we can use it, because I think there are deeper things that we want students to learn other than just basic facts and formulas. So I like to think that technology can be used for students to create things. So using an Excel spreadsheet, for instance, to create a series of numbers and look for patterns. So that's something that I think they can do. With what we're building, we create simulations so that students can take a look at various mathematical aspects in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in a static environment on a chalkboard or a piece of paper. So I think that there's a lot of uses of technology that we haven't fully tapped to really get kids fully engaged in mathematics and think about those bigger ideas of problem solving and creation on their own rather than just basic skills.
Okay.
Our next two questions are for Mr. Neil Bush.
Hi, my name is Patrick. Why did you decide to advocate for literacy, and what did you do to hope to accomplish through the mission?
Why did I decide to become involved in literacy?
An advocate for literacy.
An advocate for literacy.
Right.
It's pretty easy. I wanted to be my mother's favorite son. So I guess another reason is, as a child, I had a real hard time reading. In fact, in, I don't know, third grade or second or third grade, my mom was invited to a reading session in my classroom, and the book got passed from kid to kid. Maybe it's before that, could have been first or second grade. It got to me, I couldn't read the words, so the kid to my left helped me, the kid to the right helped me, the teacher helped me, and she realized I literally struggled as a reader. And so she did everything in her power to try to help remediate me, and you know, and it was a struggle. School was a struggle for me. So I personally have experienced the challenge of not being a great reader, and I know how difficult it was for me to survive in school. In fact, my mom was told when I was in 7th grade, when I went to Washington, D.C., that I wouldn't graduate from high school based on the high school, or the school I attended and stuff. The trick for me personally was I loved sports, so I ended up reading sporting news every week when it came to my house, and I would love certain players, and I would look up those players, and I read for interest and became a competent reader, and I struggled through school. I worked harder probably than most kids, but I ended up becoming a pretty good reader, and I graduated from college. I graduated from with a master's. So anyway, that's one thing. I have a personal experience. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't know if you guys were plugged into this, but I believe, and my mother believes, that you can't possibly realize your fullest potential unless you can read well, unless you can read at an age-appropriate level. If you're an adult and you can't read, you can't possibly succeed as well as people that can read. If you're in school and you're a little bit struggling as a reader, there's no shame in asking for help. If you're a great reader, there's great joy in helping a kid that's struggling become a better reader. But if you're in school and you can't read very well, your grades are probably not going to be as good as they could be otherwise. And so I really believe for society to deal with a lot of our big problems and for individuals to be able to realize their fullest potential, we need to have a more literate America. So in Houston, our mission is to build a campaign so that everyone is aware of the importance of literacy and to raise up all the organizations that are doing wonderful things to help adults, to help kids. And we want everyone in Houston to be literate. And when that happens, you're going to see Houston continue to thrive as a city, and that'll be a model for other cities. So that's a pretty humble objective. We just want to change the world.
Good morning. My name is Ryan. Did you have a favorite or special place to read when you were at the White House?
I was an adult by then. I was like 20. I was 20 years old when I think my parents sold it. No, I was a young parent when my parents moved in. So I used to read to my kids. There's one place in the White House that is just the coolest place of all places in the residence. So the residence is made up of the main floor where there's the Lincoln bedroom, and my parents had the president and his wife have a room, and there's a beautiful reception rooms and an office and that kind of thing. Upstairs there's more residence, more rooms that are slightly more informal but still beautiful, and a pool room and an exercise room. And then there's a little nook above that second floor that you get to by walking up a slightly graded ramp. It's called the solarium. And it's called a solarium because there's light that comes pouring through that room from all directions. And it is the quietest, kind of the nicest place. And I remember putting my kids on my lap and reading to them in that room. So that would be my favorite room. But you can almost not go wrong. If you lived in the White House, you could find so many beautiful places to read books. And so become president and go figure it out for yourself.
Thank you very much for those questions.
Thank you, Arizona.
We're now going to go to Milborn Middle School in New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Nathan. And this question is from Mr. Patrick Venabush and Mr. Neil Bush. How has technology, Twitter, Facebook, etc., helped or hurt diplomacy?
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, please.
Susan and I were actually talking about this question a little bit yesterday. And I think I'll bring up the same word again, that idea of transparency. There's very little you can say now that the world doesn't know immediately. And so politicians, occasionally we hear the word spin, that they'll twist a story. Well, you can't twist stories anymore. You say something, it's out there, and millions of people are going to react. And so, it's again that idea that you need to be honest and transparent in all your actions, and the world's watching. And when something happens, the world expects an immediate response now. So you have to deal with that as well. So I think that's the biggest way that's probably influenced diplomacy and how diplomats have to act.
Yeah, I totally agree with the other Bush on the stage, the Venabush. The technology today makes us so much closer as a world. There's nothing that can't be said that isn't immediately digested somewhere else. Interestingly, when my dad was president, there was a conflict caused by this brutal dictator from Iraq that invaded Kuwait, a guy named Saddam Hussein. And Saddam Hussein used his muscle to take over a little country. My dad worked very hard through his diplomacy and with his team to build a coalition to try to kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. And technology back in those days was such that there wasn't Twitter or Facebook, but there was CNN. And so my dad, when he wanted to communicate a message directly to Saddam Hussein, because there weren't country-to-country communications taking place, would make a pronouncement from the White House that was broadcast on CNN, and Saddam Hussein definitely got that message. So that was the first sign of technology being able to bridge gaps and bring the world closer. But today we live in this Twitter world, and the only thing I would add to what Patrick said is, just be responsible in your use of Twitter or Facebook or social media. Don't put out lies. Too many lies are published as though they're fact, and too many people want to believe things that aren't true, and so they're gullible. And so this is true. I love the way you added in the question about trust. honesty. Just be honest about things and be truthful about things. And then you can use Twitter and those things when you grow up in a constructive and positive way. And I would give that same advice to adults who happen to be president or in positions of leadership today. Okay.
Hi, I'm Ruby, and I have a question for Mr. Neil Bush. It must be very difficult to make sure that various traditions and cultural norms are respected when dealing with the global community. Do you know of any major mistakes made when hosting the leaders of other countries?
That's a really good question, and I'm sure there are like lots of great examples of faux pas like that. I would imagine that in my brother's presidency and my dad's presidency and the current presidency, that we have a protocol division. A protocol is the group that is supposed to make sure that we don't do things that are offensive, that we are respectful of other cultures, that there are protocol, that the protocol department of the White House would be so sensitive that they wouldn't create a faux pas. But that is, and it sounds like, it clearly is important, as I've stressed before, that when you travel overseas, that you not make assumptions about things. There's in some parts of the world, if you lift your foot up and you show the butt of your shoe, that's offending to some people. So just try to be aware of, and try not to be, so high and mighty that you're not willing to be respectful of other people's ways of life and their cultures. It just seems so simple to me and such an easy thing to do, and it clearly is the best way to establish friendships, to be very culturally conscious and not to offend people unnecessarily.
Thank you very much, Milburn. We are now going to go to Brewer Community School in Maine.
Hi, my name is Drew. And now we have a question for Mr. Limbo. How long did our class just participated in the Hour of Code and the Faith introduced to computer programming? How long did it take for you to play a game?
Can you repeat the question?
No, I know the question. Thank you so much. The question is, they just participated in an hour of code at their school, and they had a really great time learning about computer programming. And the question for me was, how long did it take me to learn enough computer programming that I could program a game? Well, I'm going to be transparent, because I said this is what we're supposed to be, right? I've never actually programmed a full game start to finish. I've done very small games that you can do in a couple of hours. But I was talking with David Schaller last night, who runs EduWeb, who built the app that we're going to see later. And I asked him about the people who work for him who do the programming. Some of them have a master's degree in computer science, and one of them taught himself. And it's just about how much effort you're willing to put into it. When I was 14, 15, and I learned to program, I probably spent, I don't know, an hour a day or so, and probably by the end of 2 years, I could do a pretty sufficient game. But it was a very simplistic game. It would take, I think, a little bit more to do something on the level of what David has put together for us. So it takes a lot of practice. There's a famous statement out there that it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert. It takes many less hours than that to be able to put something together, but you just got to keep working at it. So I'll just encourage you to stay diligent in your studies of computer coding, and you'll get there.
Good morning, my name is Gabby. And our last questions are for Mr. Neil Bush.
Gabby.
What was it like growing up of the president and first lady?
You're so cute, Gabby. Is this the last question? Because
There's a second part to that.
Oh, there is. Okay,
Yeah.
but I love the sign in the background, Gabby. Thank you, your classmates, for extending good wishes to my parents. That's very, very thoughtful. There you go.
There they are.
Oh,
That's so sweet.
it's wonderful.
That's really beautiful. Wow. As soon as I'm finished with this, I'm going to the hospital to visit my parents to continue reading the book that I'm currently reading to them. So I can't wait to tell them how much goodwill there is being shared here. I think I've alluded to this earlier. I was raised by two parents that were just great parents, first and foremost great parents. I don't think of them as having accomplished, that's not the right way to put it. I don't think of them in the context that one was the president and the other first lady, that, you know, my dad has had a remarkable career. If you think about it, he was 18 years old when he signed up to become a pilot in the Navy. He was shot down in service to his country. He was a businessman and successful in his business. He was a congressman. He did all these amazing things and was successful in everything he did. But his greatest success is that he's an amazing dad. And so he doesn't, I don't think any of my siblings, my brothers or my sister, would answer this any differently. I think we just felt like we were raised by loving, caring, amazing parents, not by a president or a first lady. My mom would make sure that we all hung our towels, you know, after you take a shower. I don't know if you guys do this in your homes, but we were told that if you take a shower and you put your towel on the floor, that it gets mildewy and kind of sticky and whatever, and so you use it again, it's not very comfortable. But if you hang it up, it dries naturally, and it keeps, you don't have to do so much laundry. She's made us make our beds in the morning. She was reading to us at night. You know, she did all these wonderful, she's been affectionately known as the enforcer, because my dad never lifted a finger to try to enforce. We just didn't want to disappoint him. So that's a great question, and it might seem strange. I guess the other side of that coin is, because I'm part of the first family, or I was, you know, there's more pressure, there's more interest, there's more awareness of our family, and I've been able to use that for literacy and for volunteerism and for kind of raising up and helping promote legacies that my parents have started on those two fronts, which I'm really proud to do. So, you know, there's great positives, I guess, a little bit of negative from being part of the first family, but being raised by two loving adult parents has been the greatest blessing in my life.
And
Maggie.
what was your favorite book that Miss Bush read to you as a child?
She is so cute. You know, I remember a few books, like Curious George and those kinds of things, but as a child, The Little Train That Could was my favorite book. And when I had kids, I read that book. I've read many books many times to all of our kids. We just love reading in our house. But I love the story of the little train that could. It's a great metaphor for life. You know, if you got a little tiny train, you got to take a heavy load up a hill, just keep trying. And eventually you get there. Eventually you get there. So anyway, sorry, but it's a great book. So I'd recommend, if you haven't read The Little Train That Could, go buy it, read it.
Thank you very much, Brewer Community School from Maine. And our last school that we're going to connect to this morning is going to be Dayton Independent School District from Dayton, Texas.
Wow.
Okay. Introduce yourself.
My name is Jonathan. This question is for Mr. Neil Bush.
Question is, how do diplomats stay cordial with people from other countries or with politicians from our own country who don't like them or don't like what they stand for?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. Unfortunately, and this is hard to explain to young people, but if you, as an adult, it's hard not to observe that in politics in the United States, we become more and more divided. That if a Republican is president, then the Democrats, who are the other party, will try to fight that Republican. If when President Obama was president, Republicans fought Obama, and there's no real willingness to try to work together on things. And I get back to my father, and you're going to think I'm obsessed with talking about how great my dad is, but when my dad was president of the United States, you know, he had a lot of people that hated him. Just like in politics, people have different sides. And yet my father worked with those people to befriend those people and to work with those people, and he had to make sacrifices. He had to make compromise. I don't know if you know what compromise means, but you can't get everything you want all the time. So sometimes you have to give a little. You give them something, you get a little something. And my father made compromises that allowed in this, and I'll talk to the adults, so that taxes were raised, which violated a great pledge he made, but expenses were cut, and our economy and the benefit of that compromise accrued to the American people. Our country grew stronger, debt-free for many years under the next president. And all that really matters is, what can you do to work with another person in a friendly and respectful way that helps other people? That's the bottom line. Whether you're in politics, like my father and my brother, or whether you're in your own school, what can you do? When you see there's a challenge in your school, if you see someone struggling, what can you do to help that kid struggling? Or if you see in your neighborhood some problem, if there's litter on the ground, what can you do to mobilize your friends to go pick up that litter on the ground? You know, what can you do to find answers to problems, even with people that don't like you? Even with people that you might not have anything in common with, what can you do to reach out to them, shake their hand, and say, let's go solve this problem together? That's what I hope all of you find ways to do, because if you do that, it's going to make you a better person, and it's going to help the problem you're trying to solve in a big way. So what a great question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jordan, and this question is for Mr. Neil Bush.
Sorry, you guys.
How do you work with people that speak different languages?
I actually do that a lot, because I spend a lot of my time traveling to Asia, just my own personal story. I do business in Asia, and as I mentioned earlier, I try to promote my father's interest in improving ties between, well, I didn't mention this specifically, but between China and the United States. China is a great country, growing country. It's coming out of a very dark period where there's very little freedom. And now China's economy has made it the second largest economy in the world, and we need to figure out a way to work with China to solve major global issues. So I go over there all the time, and it's very difficult when someone speaks only Chinese, and I speak very little. I speak effectively no Chinese, and you have to rely on a translator. You just have to wonder, is the translation really effectively communicating not just the content of what you're saying, but the feeling and the nuance, you know, the little things that you want to say. And so I'm sure it's true in your school when you run into some kid that might have just come into your community that might not speak great English language, for example, or might not understand, you know, the traditions in your school. There's different things. Where there might be a miscommunication, you have to work really hard to forgive people and to be trying to find what's best about that communication. You know, don't be silly. Don't try to take everyone's word for it. Be open and careful about what you accept. But, you know, I love my fathers and my mother both. They look for what's best in people, and they try to make the best out of situations. So if you have trouble communicating with someone, try to work extra hard to find understanding where it's complicated. But it's a big challenge. When you go overseas and you can't speak the language, it's like what do? You just have to have good translation.
Pam Nevin, a quick word of thanks to you. I believe that is our last question. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is the last question.
Very nice. Pam, thank you so much for everything that you do for us every year. It's been a pleasure, and things went really well this year. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it for Pam.
Thank you. We've already heard from her, but we're honored this morning to have with us Susan Donius. She is the National Archive Director of Presidential Libraries. She's come to us from Washington, D.C. Mrs. Donius will give us some insights about diplomatic gifts that have been received from 5 countries that are featured in the White House Dinner Dash app that I mentioned a little bit earlier. These gifts are part of the George Bush Presidential Library and Museum collection. Documents such as treaties are also in the government records of the National Archives. Please make welcome to the Bush Library today, Susan Donius.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so honored to be part of this special program, the Reading Discovery Program, which is celebrating its 10th year here. I know that we opened the program with many thank yous, but I also want to just emphasize a few additional ones to the George Bush Presidential Foundation for all of their support of not only this program, but all of the programming that happens at the Presidential Library here in College Station, and also to Dr. Shirley Hammond. Shirley has put on this incredible program today and has championed it for the past 10 years. And I can speak as someone who works with all of the presidential libraries that this is one of the marquee programs, not just here in College Station, but throughout the country. So Shirley, thank you so much for your 10 years of dedication and support to this. So, as I said, my role as director of the Office of Presidential Libraries is to support the presidential libraries that are part of the National Archives. And you might be wondering, other than the George Bush Library, which libraries does that include? And we have this wonderful map to help illustrate where libraries are located across the country. So for not only those of you in the room here who have access to 3 presidential libraries in Texas, we also have 14 libraries nationwide for our guests and visitors who joined us via video conference this morning, so that there are opportunities to visit a presidential library in your community and learn about the incredible history that we hold. Each of our presidential libraries that reflects their president includes the records of that president's administration, as well as the head of state and domestic gifts that were presented to the president and the first family when they were in office. So if you're wondering about 14, and if those of you who love math have already noted that there's only 13, President Obama's library is now officially part of our system. As you know, we had a presidential transition last week, and his photo will soon be added to that map up near Chicago, where his temporary library site is currently located. So today I will be showing you a few select head of state gifts that President Bush received during his presidency when top leaders of other nations visited him in Washington, D.C. During visits like these, the president hosted special state dinners at the White House, and there are also many meetings that take place during those visits where leaders exchange gifts. These gifts show the friendship between these two nations and often are representative of the country that they came from. These gifts are also featured in the White House Dinner Dash app that was referenced earlier and that you're going to get a walkthrough with Patrick later in the program. So the first gift was given by Egyptian President Mubarak in 1989. It is a lovely, flat woven wool rug which shows a depiction of an Egyptian scene, including pyramids, palm trees, and birds, which are all on a gold-colored background with fringe on each end. The rug is over 5 feet long, taller than many of you, I suspect, or longer in height, and also almost 4 feet wide. This is a beautiful and welcoming depiction of Egypt and reflects that country's image to the United States as well as to the world. And we're going to hear more about the state dinner from crew later in the program this morning. The second state gift is from the Philippines, was given at a state dinner in November of 1989. This was a gift of President Aquino of the Philippines. So if you look at this object, you'll see that it has many familiar shapes, both flowers and stars. This beautiful artifact is a Philippine lantern that is illuminated and can be lit up from within. It was handcrafted out of multicolored capiz shells, and capiz shells are named after the province in the Philippines from where they come. They are often used as a material in arts and crafts from that country. You may know that stars often symbolize good luck, and they represent turning points in a person's life, and it is a popular symbol throughout the world. The next state gift is from the United Kingdom of Great Britain. This is a carriage clock, and it's called a carriage clock because it dates back to the 1800s when people traveled by carriage, horse-drawn carriage, and they used the clock, and it was also often had a light within it. This was presented to President Bush by Queen Elizabeth II of England. The carriage clock is in a brass case, and the face of the clock is made of white enamel and there's a very thick glass that protects the case on all sides. The symbolism of this carriage clock is to express the importance of friendship and diplomacy between the United States and England. And Taisha is going to tell us more about that state dinner in a little bit. The next gift is from Morocco. This beautiful world globe is made of fine crystal and was given by King Hassan II of Morocco. The continents shown on this globe are made with brushed 18-karat gold with blue enamel borders. An engraved rock crystal shows where mountain ranges are located on these continents. The flags of Morocco and the United States are placed on the globe at the site of each country's capital city. This gift shows friendship between the two nations and the connection between the country's leaders. Their initials, GB for President George Bush and H II for King Hassan II, appear on the globe's case along with the American and Moroccan flags. And this final state gift is from Russia. It was given by President Boris Yeltsin, and it is a vase made of brass with a floral pattern. That floral design around the vase is made up of a fine silver wire called filigree. Filigree is used to make very delicate art or jewelry. The gift of a vase is symbolic of friendship and reflects the close relationship between President Bush and President Yeltsin. Sarish will tell us more about this state dinner in a few minutes. So you might be wondering, as we go to the next slide, why I have a photo of Millie. And do all of you know who Millie was? Okay, I guess you can't be in this community and not know about Millie. So earlier in the program, I mentioned that the presidential libraries have both head of state as well as domestic gifts. So by comparison, we have about 1,500 head of state gifts in the library right across the courtyard, and we have over 100,000 domestic gifts. So domestic gifts are given by the American people to the president or first lady, and sometimes even the first pet will get gifts. So I thought you all might like to see, and I saw hands raised earlier that you all love dogs and animals, and how many of you all have dogs as pets at home? Okay, so this is really going to be fun. This next slide shows a gift that was given to Millie during the Bush presidency. It is a satin-designed pajama set for Millie. And you'll see part of our collection is the artist rendering, as well as the photograph of Millie wearing the outfit. And I want you all to think about when your pets' birthdays are coming up in the next year. I think this is the great idea for each of your dogs, is to get them a set of party pajamas, okay? So I hope that this was a fun illustration of the head of state gifts that we have, not only here at the George Bush Library, but throughout the system. And I hope that when you're out traveling with your families, that you're able to get out to the other libraries in Texas, as well as all 14 across the country. And really appreciate you all being here today. So thank you very much.
Forget about the pair of the pajamas for the dog. How many of you would like to have a pair of pink pajamas like that? Anybody? All right, great. Susan, thank you for your words as well. We're honored to have you here as well. It's wonderful also to welcome Patrick Venabush. You have already heard him speak a little bit. He's Discovery Education Director of Learning Strategies. His career began as a middle and high school mathematics teacher in Pennsylvania. He has served as Associate Director for PBS Teacher Line, Online Projects Manager for NCTM Illuminations, and Chair of the Math Counts Question Writing Committee. He is a learning game enthusiast and has initiated math learning games still being used today. Please welcome to the Bush Library, Patrick Venabush. Thank you, Matt.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me be here today. I'm trying to get the slides to go up, and I don't know if they're going to. They are. So my name is Patrick Venabush, as you've already heard. I'm with Discovery Education. How many of you know the Discovery Channel and watch shows on it? So that's our company. Discovery Education is one group within that company. My name is Patrick Venabush, but one thing that you should know, I go by my middle name, which is Patrick. My first name, actually, and Neil alluded to this, is that Bush is in my last name. My first full official name is George. So George Bush, the namesake of this library, is actually part of my name. So I feel like it's destiny that I'm here today with you. So thank you so much for having me. As you heard as well, my background is actually in mathematics. So we're going to start with a little bit of a math problem. I know, math. Who knew you were going to have to do math when you got here today? But it's going to be fun, I hope. So here's what I want you to do a little bit of math. I want you to think of several numbers that add up to 20. So go ahead and do this in your head. Think of some numbers that add up to 20. Okay, you got it? You can tell your friend if you want to. That's fine. I don't mind a little bit of noise. So now what I want you to do is those numbers that you just thought of in your head, I want you to multiply them together. So maybe you can do that in your head. Maybe you need a calculator, but hopefully you can do it. And what I want you to do, what's the product of your numbers? Tell your friend what you got, and have your friend tell you what they got. What's the biggest product that anybody got? Anybody want to share? You up there, you want to go ahead, stand up and tell me. Can you yell it out real loud? Oh, she sat back down. Somebody else want to tell us? Go ahead, in the blue shirt. 20 times 1. So what's the product of 20 times 1? I'm sorry? 20. 20. Okay. So 20 and 1 don't quite add up to 20, but 19 and 1 would. So you get something like that. You want to tell us as well? What'd you get? 5 times 4 does give 20. Gives 20, and 17 times 3. Do you know what that is? Right, so that adds up to 20, and then we're going to multiply those numbers together. So multiplying 17 times 3 is 51. So that gets even a little bit bigger. You got some numbers for us that add up to 20? 10 and 10. So 10 times 10 is 100. So that's even bigger still. So you guys, it seems like you all use 2 numbers, but you could use maybe 3 numbers or 4 numbers, like 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 adds up to 20, and then you multiply those together. That'd get even bigger still. So this is kind of where I think games sort of come into the math. So I would ask, can you get a bigger product? We got 100 here. Can we get even bigger than 100? Can we get bigger than 1,000 maybe? I don't know. So this is what I think is kind of cool. So I want to talk to you today about gamification and using games in the classroom. And I actually think that math problems are the first form of games that we can use in the classroom. So gamification, this is the definition that I got off the web. It's the application of game elements like using points, like competition, using rules of play, as a marketing technique to encourage engagement with a product or service. So teachers actually use gamification all the time already, right? You use point scoring, you give kids grades, you have competition or collaboration where kids work together or in competition with each other. There are rules in your classroom, at least I hope there are rules in your classroom. So gamification already exists, but I'm going to talk a little about what it means in terms of learning games. But I think the big thing there, it says typically as a marketing technique to encourage engagement. So teachers in some ways marketers, they're trying to get you guys hooked in and ready to learn and think about things. My friend Dan Meyer says that he's selling a product to a market that doesn't really want it but is forced by law to buy it. So that's what happens in education, right? Kids have to go to school and we want to teach them things, and kids are trying to get them, teachers are trying to get the kids excited. So that's gamification with a math problem. I think there are other ways to get into gamification as well. And my friend Lee Shelton actually does this. Can you imagine your first day of class if your teacher said this to you? Good morning, you all have an F. Wouldn't you be mortified? You'd hate that. But that's exactly what happens when you play a video game. When you start a video game, you don't start with 1,000 points. You start with 0, right? So Lee Sheldon, my friend Lee Sheldon, that's what he says about gamifying the classroom. He doesn't take points away whenever you do an assignment. He instead gives you points. And he calls those experience points in his classroom. And if you don't earn any experience points, you get an F in his class. And if you do what I would say the bare minimum, if you get 1,200 points in his class, you get a D-. If you really work hard and you do a lot of assignments, you turn in a lot of essays and things like that, and you earn 1,860 points in his class, he'll give you an A. So you get to earn that thing, you build it up. So that's a use of gamification in the classroom that's kind of cool. But I think it's important that we have these gamified elements in the classroom. We can do it with learning games, we can do it with other things that we do, because play is very useful. It simulates what happens in the real world. It's safe, it's iterative, meaning you get to do it again and again. When you play a game and you don't do as well as you want to, what do? You hit the replay button, right? And it's social. Do you ever talk with your friends about what happens in a game and how you're doing and how you get a higher score? We can do the same kind of things when we're learning as well. So I like to use play in the classroom, not because they're winners and losers, because it's very useful to help kids learn. So why should we use games in the classroom? This is a message more for your teachers maybe than for you, but this is why I think it's important. So video games have elements that are really important for the best learning environments. So kids are motivated, there are clear goals, you know what you have to do, you have to knock down a tower that has a bunch of piggies on it with some birds, right? We know what the goals are. You can interpret the outcomes. You know what happens when you knock down that tower, if it's a good thing or not. And you get immediate feedback. So these are really good elements of video games that we use in the classroom as well. Learning is enhanced through a social aspect. When you play games, you talk to your friends about what you do. So when you play learning games like White House Dinner Dash, you get to have that social aspect as well. Video games often also include tasks that are really hard to do. And that's a good thing, because we want you to push yourself to become really good problem solvers. And one of the things that's true about research, if you teach people just facts and formulas, what they remember are facts and formulas. Well, I have a phone in my pocket, and it already knows a lot of facts and formulas. What I want kids to know is how to solve problems and to think for themselves. And so the cool thing about video games and what happens there is when kids solve problems in video games, when they solve problems in the real world, they learn the facts as an added bonus that goes with it. And we can teach them those advanced level skills with learning games that makes that happen. So now I should tell you that I'm very biased. I love technology, and part of the reason I love technology, these are my sons on the screen. That's Eli on the left and Alex on the right. This picture was taken when they were 3 years old. And I said when they were 3 years old because they're twins. How many of you here are twins? Any twins in the audience? Love it. So in fact, they're not just twins, they're identical twins. You might not have noticed that because Eli's using a graphing calculator and Alex is using a scientific calculator. So if you couldn't tell they were identical, that's not your fault. I threw a red herring in there. But this is a little bit of why I love technology. I've seen what it can do with kids. I've seen that just by playing with it, they can learn things I never expected. I gave them the calculators because it had buttons on it that they liked to push. And before they went to school, we never used flashcards. We didn't talk about what 2 times 3 was, but they knew all the basic number facts that kids generally need by 3rd through 5th grade. And that was only because they played with it. And then they'd ask me questions, and I'd be happy to give them answers. But I never forced anything on them about those facts, and they learned them on their own. That's what a little bit of why I love technology. So, and I've seen, not only with my own kids, but what technology can do. And it can do a lot of things. So I already said that we want games to be social. So games encourage collaboration. There's a great site called Boom Writer where your teacher can write the first sentence of a chapter, and then you get to write the rest of it. And over the course of the year, she'll write more first sentences, and you'll write more chapters. By the end of the year, you have this cool full book. Protagonize is a similar site that does the same kinds of things. You can produce a lot of examples really quickly. You can use Excel to generate number lists and sequences and things like that and see what's going on. So that's pretty cool. It can encourage students to read more. How many of you know the site Goodreads? Or maybe for your age, how many of you know the site Kids Reads? So this is a site where you can see ratings by other people of books, and you can rate books, and you can know what other people find interesting, and you can find things that you find interesting. It's really great sites like that. So technology can do that. I mean, it's a little bit of that whole Twitter phenomenon that we were talking about. You can perform experiments that would be impossible without technology. And I'll use an example from Discovery Education that we built. We have a simulation where kids can decide how much water, how much sunlight, how much dirt, et cetera, to use to grow tomato plants. And they can see a simulation to see, did they get a lot of tomatoes, did they get a few tomatoes? Well, if you grew tomatoes in real life, that could take a couple of weeks to happen each time. But with a simulation, you can do it repeatedly. So it's really cool. It provides instant access to resources. So there's the Docs Teach website. If you guys aren't familiar with that, it has a lot of history resources. There's the Miller Center where you can hear and you can read any presidential inaugural speech and you can see what it says. So that's kind of cool. Those are things that I couldn't have touched when I was in school, and I wasn't in school really that long ago. So, and I think the biggest thing that we get excited about it. So using learning games in the classroom really helps to instill excitement. So, but I said I had a bias that I love technology, but my bigger bias is I like good teaching even more. And there are a lot of things I've seen with technology that I don't think are good. And I don't mean to make fun of anybody in particular, but I want to show you what I mean by sometimes things that aren't so good. So this is a game called Math Dots Fairy Princess. And it's been downloaded by over 200,000 schools in the US. And if you haven't downloaded it, I recommend that you don't. I don't think it's a very good game, and I'll tell you why. So what happens is you get these dots drawing out a little bit of a picture there. So this is an interactive board. What picture do you think is being drawn by those white dots on the screen? Maybe a fish? A horse, maybe? An aardvark? I'm hearing a lot of good suggestions. I have to be honest with you. One of the reasons I don't love this game, I have no idea what's going to be drawn there. That's not the way I'm used to seeing a dot-to-dot game happen. But the way it works is you see that it says 10 plus 2 in the upper right corner. We have to choose the proper answer there. Which is it, 12, 11, 5, or 10? So if you pick 12, what happens is a dot appears in the center of that 12, and it keeps drawing dots. If you do 20 problems like this, 20, problems that look exactly like this, it eventually draws a bigger picture for you. And that picture looks like this. Did you know that it was going to be a woman in a carriage being pulled by a horse? That was not one of the guesses that I heard. That's not what I've ever expected. So here's what we sometimes do with apps like this. We make kids do 20 problems when there's research that says if a kid can do something 5 times, they know it, stop badgering them. And this asks them to do it 20 times. And their reward for going through the tedium of doing 20 problems in a row is they get this picture that they get to color in. So what I don't particularly like about this app is it says, look, if you tolerate the math, we'll give you something fun. And I think that's the wrong message to send. I want the math to be the fun. I like that problem that I gave you at the very beginning. That's what I want to make fun. So this is a great quote from Stephen Lewis. He says, what do we do with these amazing devices we have? We create blue bears wearing backpacks on roller skates going across a farm field who tries to coax a duck to climb a ladder to convince us that 3 + 1 = 4. I don't think that's the best way we can use technology. That's why I love that question that was asked at the beginning. There are better ways that we can use technology. So I think there's a lot of criteria we should look for when we're choosing learning apps for the classroom. So my friend Warren Buckleitner says that a student who uses an app needs to feel success within 10 seconds or you'll get homed. And what he means by that is there's that little home button on the bottom of your iPad that if kids aren't having success with their app pretty quickly, they're closing it out. So a really good example of this is Angry Birds, right? First time you go into Angry Birds level 1, what's it do? It puts a finger there and it says, hey, pull here. Because you didn't know to do that. When you pull here, what happens? You let go. The bird goes flying, it takes out some of the tower, you felt success within 5 seconds. I hope that math problem that I gave you earlier, you felt success pretty quickly. I think that you could come up with a couple numbers that add up to 20. I tried to get you success early as well. So I think that we can do it both with learning games and what we do in the classroom. I also think that games have to have really good content. And I know that probably sounds a little weird, but I want the math to be correct. This game that we created, it's for upper elementary school students. This is part of Math Tech Book, which I helped to build at Discovery Education. We use the coordinate plane, and kids are trying to find things. They're on a scavenger hunt, but they're learning about the coordinate plane. How many of you have learned about the coordinate plane yet? You guys know this? It's going to be coming for some of you pretty soon, so get ready. Take a mental picture of this. You're going to need to know it soon. But they look for the Queen's toothbrush, and they do something that's pretty active and fun. So I think there are a lot of criteria that we want to look for whenever we're choosing learning games. So one of them is instant engagement. That's what I talked about like with Angry Birds or the math problem I gave you. It needs to have correct and relevant content. So it has to have correct calculations, theorems, proper grammar, right names and dates, things like that. Proper theories, correct results. I think the content has to be something kids can explore and play with. That it's not just for assessment and it's testing whether or not they know something, but it's letting them actually learn something. It has to promote collaboration. Almost every game does this inherently. And I think a really big thing is it has to have what I call effective and necessary feedback. So it's telling them how they're doing. Sometimes it's with stars, as you'll see in the White House Dinner Dash app, but it's got to be immediate and it's got to be positive. Like, yep, you did a good thing. Keep doing that. You're doing well. So where can you find these kinds of things? So I already mentioned that I work at Discovery Education. I think we do some great things. There are professional organizations called the National Councils of Teachers of Mathematics and the National Councils of Teachers of English. They do great things as well. NCTM, the National Council of Teachers of Math, has a site called Calculation Nation. How many of you have ever been on Calculation Nation? Oh, I got to see more hands next time I come here. So I want you to go to Calculation Nation. They have 12 games that you can either play by yourself, or if you're logged on with someone else who wants to play, you can challenge them to a game. So I know that you can now do this on the iPad and everything like that. We were one of the first people who ever built that at NCTM. So these are really great math games that I think you can use there. NCTE, the National Council of Teachers of English, they have these interactives that they use as well. And I love the way that these work. Really easy to get into. All you have to do is put in your name and a title for your poem, and then it's going to tell you how to create a Diamante poem. You do the work, you're being creative, but you learn about a Diamante poem by doing this. So you're learning what you need to learn. Instead of just being told what it is, you actually get to build it. So the other place that you can look if you're a teacher, there's a site called Common Sense Media. How many of the adults in the audience know this site? So this is a site I highly recommend that you use. It doesn't use crowdsourcing. It's not random user ratings. It's ratings specifically from people who know what they're talking about. They rate everything. They rate movies, books, TV, etc. I searched for educational websites about creativity and language and reading for ages 12 to 16. You can only see 2 results it gave me there, but it actually had about 50 on the page. So instead of going to the App Store where there are currently 2.2 million apps and you got to figure out what to use, go to Common Sense Media and take a look about what kinds of things they recommend. I highly recommend that you do that. So the other place that I'll recommend that you look is right here. The Bush 41 Library does great things, and we're going to take a look at the White House Dinner Dash app in just a second. And you can find it at whitehousedinnерdash.com. It's available from the App Store, from Google Play, and I think it's a really great resource. So if you could go ahead and roll the video for us. David Schaller put together a video for us to see what this actually looks like. So you start out with some basic information, of course. This is a quote that you're going to get to hear in a little bit. You get to choose what dinner you want. Crue's going to tell you about the dinner with Aquino, and Maggie's going to tell you about the dinner with the Queen of England. You get to choose which one you want to do. When you start, you obviously do dinner 1. It tells you what the diplomatic goal of that dinner is going to be. So you get to choose a menu, table settings, and chart. When you choose a menu, Aaron's going to tell you about the kinds of menus they have and what kinds of things they may have wanted to eat. You get to pick which menu they're going to get to use at the dinner. Obviously, you want to be sensitive to the culture of the other person who's going to be attending the dinner. So this is an Egyptian president. You want to make sure you choose something that's palatable to them. You get to choose the table settings. You can use President Reagan's, Johnson's, or Wilson's china. And there may be something that they particularly like. You know, you might want to have birds or flowers or something particular on it. Really cool part of it is you get to set up the seating chart. You get to decide where everybody sits. Now, some people have designated seats. Clearly, President Bush is going to be at table 1 and the First Lady is going to be at table 2. President Mubarak and his wife are going to be seated next to those, to the leaders from our country. And then some other people were important. And then it becomes a jigsaw puzzle that you get to play. You have to put everybody else at a table. So as they come in, you want to put people in places where they're going to want to actually talk to the other people at their table. If they don't want to talk business, you don't want to put them next to a business person. If they want to talk about a military, you want to put them next to a military leader. So you get to fill this in, and this video is sped up a little bit. But you put them all in, and it says, hey, are you doing a good job getting the mood of the room? Look at the guest mood, 3 stars. You've done a good job. Well, now you get to start the dinner, and this is where the Dash part of it comes in. So how many of you have played Dash apps or Dash games before? How many played World Chef or some of those Diner Dash? So similar kind of thing here. You get to serve people water, wine, and food. And you get to serve these things on big courses and platters, and the waiter's going to get to do that. Luis is going to tell you a little bit about how that was done whenever he reads to you in a few minutes. But you can see people are coming in, their mood is on each table. This is sped up a little bit so you can see what happens. They're doing diplomacy. You're doing a good job keeping them hydrated right now with some water and some wine, and they're pretty happy. So they're engaging in diplomatic conversation. Well, but guess what? They're hungry, so the waiter better start serving them food. That's going to happen right after President Bush and President Mubarak give a toast. So you can see actually these are the words that they actually said as part of their toast. And then the waiter's going to start serving the food. You can see you were reminded there that the trays are empty. He doesn't move this fast in the real game. You don't have to play quite that quickly. But this is sped up so you can see it's a 4-course meal. So you're going to learn about those meals that were served whenever our reading buddies read to us in a little bit. And you can see there's diplomacy happening all over the place because they're in such a good mood. You can see that the mood meters are very high on all the table. You did a great job managing the dinner. The dinner ends. All the guests are going to go hear some entertainment from, in this case, Maureen McGovern. And Suresh is going to tell you about some of the entertainment that happened at some of the state dinners. But in each one of the dinners, you're going to get to see some of the entertainment that these guests got to see. But then you can look at a lot of the background information. So you can see the gift, like Susan Donia showed you. It's the actual asset is in the app there. You can upgrade based on how good you do. You earn stars. You can use those stars to upgrade your trays or your drinks or your waiters or whomever. And then you get to play other games. You can go into the dinner with Corazon Aquino. You get to choose any of them there. So you get to see all this kind of great background information. Ariel and Sophie are going to tell you about all the background information that you're going to see. And you can see how the state dining room was set up. There's a lot of information there. What kind of food is being served. Tayesh is going to tell you about the kinds of food that was served and how it was served as part of her reading section. So it's all this kind of cool stuff built into one really awesome app. Where do they eat? It shows you the layout, what kind of flowers are used, how they get the room ready so that it's presentable. Who serves the food? It tells you a little bit about the waiters and what kind of training they need to have. And that's the app. So I think it's really cool. I'd love for all of you to go to whitehouse-dinner-org or .com and download it. Go to the App Store, go to Google Play, and definitely check it out. Thank you so much for letting me have some of your time today. I hope you play a lot of games and have a lot of fun.
On the last part of our program here today, I got to say the most patient 8 students in this room are the ones that are sitting right up here, patiently waiting their turn, being still all this time, and all dressed up today. I just want to thank you guys for just bearing with us during this program. But now the time has come. Our reading buddies will now read about White House diplomacy and 5 state dinners in some brief passages. We have reading buddies in the 4th and 5th grades from Henderson Elementary School and the Bryan ISD. They are Ariel, Sophia, Aaron and Luis. You're up.
Hi, my name is Ariel. The history and tradition of state dinners at the White House is an important part of diplomacy. The President is the chief diplomat of the United States. President Ulysses Grant gave the first White House state dinner in 1874 for the King of Hawaii. Difficulty in travel limited White State House dinners during our early history. During times of war, there are fewer occasions for diplomatic dinners. After World War II, the state dining room was increased in size so that President and Mrs. Bush were able to host 130 guests. Presidents and First Ladies have entertained in their own special style. In 1801, the Marine Band first played for a White House New Year's reception. Military musical groups continue to entertain at the White House. Hi, my name is Sophia. The purpose of diplomacy is to build friendly relations between countries. President Bush had experience as a diplomat at the United Nations and in China prior to working at the Oval Office at the White House. As vice president, he traveled around the world on diplomatic missions for President Reagan. President Bush's social secretary, Lori Firestone, said he was very diplomatically oriented and understood that entertaining was a part of the president's job. President Bush said, "There's nothing frivolous about it. I want to break bread with the foreign leader before we have difficult negotiations. If you've had dinner and sat across from each other and visited the night before, you can't just come in the next morning and say horrible things and pound your fist on the table." Thank you.
Hi, my name's Aaron. A state dinner is a major diplomatic event. The Bushes had 29 state dinners altogether. Officials from the two countries began planning for the state dinner many months ahead. Many menus are discussed with concerns for culture, religious restrictions, and special diets, including personal likes and dislikes. President Bush and First Lady Barbara Bush met with the social secretary and chef to approve menus and other plans. Seating placement of invited guests is very important. The Bushes provide interpreters to assure clear communication between guests. The after-dinner entertainment in the East Room is carefully chosen regarding multicultural preferences. Famous performing artists are chosen to perform.
Hi, I'm Luis. On the day of the state dinner, last-minute details are checked, including handmade place cards and menu cards reflecting the visiting country's cultural heritage. The floral arrangements are made with great care. Often they represent the visiting diplomat's country. There is extra staff helping the White House waiters take great pride in managing and supervising the dinners. The French method of serving is used. The food is placed on large platters and passed by the waiters for guests to serve themselves. There are 4 courses: appetizers, soup, main course, and a special dessert made with care to honor the other country. The White House dinner usually lasts 1 hour. At the Bush's dinner, music from strolling violin players was heard.
Thank you to Ariel, Sophia, Aaron, and Luis. And we will now move to the reading buddies in 4th and 5th grades from Houston Elementary School of the Bryan ISD. We will hear from Crew, Tyasia, Maggie, and Sarish.
Hi, I'm Crew. The first state dinner by President George Bush and First Lady Barbara Bush was held for President Mubarak of Egypt on April 4, 1989. The goal of the dinner was to build relationships between Egyptians and Americans committed to peace in the Middle East. State dinners for the leaders of Israel and Jordan followed to emphasize President Bush's diplomatic leadership seeking peace in the Middle East. Diplomatic exchanges with other countries continued in 1989 with a state dinner honoring President Aquino of the Philippines. The goal was to get better acquainted and to consult about the Philippines' priorities. This was a memorable evening because President Bush made a major diplomatic announcement that the Berlin Wall had fallen. Applause erupted.
Hi, I'm Taisha. On May 14, 1991, Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain, the most traveled head of state in the world, was honored by President and Ms. Bush at a state dinner. The goal was to salute the relationship between the two countries who share a legacy of democracy, rule of law, and basic human rights. Invitations to this dinner were highly sought after due to this historical lineage between our two countries. The menu reflected British and American tastes: Maine lobster, cucumber mousse with crown roast of lamb. The specially created state dinner's dessert was an edible chocolate carriage topped with fresh raspberries. Even the chocolate wheels on the carriage could be eaten. President Bush liked to taste every single part of the dessert.
Hi, I'm Maggie. President and Mrs. Bush honored King Hassan II of Morocco on September 26, 1991. President Bush mentioned that the 1787 Moroccan-American Treaty of Peace and Friendship is the longest unbroken treaty in United States history. The goal was relationship building to grow and prosper in trade as partners sharing a common interest. Both countries were seeking security and peace throughout the Middle East. A very royal and traditional Moroccan outfit was worn by King Hassan II. He was dressed in a gold robe and wearing a gold hat and shoes. His daughter and niece were dressed in magnificent, shimmering Moroccan evening gowns. First Lady Barbara Bush wore a beautiful lavender and silver gown. In attendance were American friends of the royalty that included a tennis star and 2 movie stars.
Hi, I'm Sarish. President Boris Yeltsin of Russia was honored at a state dinner on June 16, 1992. The goal focused on the beginning of a new era. America was striving to build peace through cooperation with Russia by building a greater partnership between the American and Russian people. President Bush offered this toast at the dinner. It was in the spirit of friendship to a new partnership between our people and to the success of the new Russian Revolution, with freedom as its goal. Music as diplomacy is a featured part of state dinners, and President Yeltsin enjoyed the Marine Band's performance. After each state dinner, a famous American entertainer provided a program in the East Room of the White House.
I'll tell you right now, I'm finna put them on the payroll. Some of them read a lot better than the anchors at Channel 3. I'm gonna tell you right now. So let's hear it for the reading buddies from Henderson and Houston. That's awesome. I want to thank you for your patience today. That concludes the first half of our program, so we'll move on. I'm only kidding. This is probably the most important part of what we're going to do. We've heard about everything that the new initiatives, we've learned about new ways to learn to read through the use of technology, about diplomacy. But I'll tell you, it has been an honor and a privilege to work with one special lady for many years on this program, and that is Barbara Bush. We're going to conclude our program with a tribute in honor of all the work that First Lady Barbara Bush has done to help improve the lives of Americans. The following are just a small sample of her many contributions. She taught us all the importance and the joy of reading. She used her bully pulpit, as they call it, to make sure we remembered what was important. She's holding an AIDS baby at Grandma's house, then ringing a bell for the Salvation Army when a local mall tried to kick them out, reminding the elderly that they were never forgotten. She made a lot of friends, some very famous. She made a lot of other friends that some would consider to be perhaps not so famous along the way. And as always, she was at the President's side. She had and continues to have his back, and she had and continues to have ours as well. So thank you, Mrs. Bush. You and the President are in our thoughts and our prayers. A special thanks to the contributions to the program by Neil Bush, National Archives Director of Presidential Libraries Susan Donius, to Discovery Education's Director of Learning Strategies Patrick Venabush, the Reading Buddies, the distance learning specialists who participated, all the students, teachers, and administrators that are joining us today. Reading provides you with exciting Discovery adventures. Please enjoy White House Dinner Dash, an action-packed pace game, while learning about White House diplomacy and friendships. Have fun reading. Find a reading buddy through distance learning. We will see you again next year all over the country, perhaps all over the world. And again, to all of you who have been here today as part of the Bryan ISD, to the visitors, guests, administrators, and teachers, thank you very much for being here. Have a wonderful day. Stay right where you are until your teachers tell you how to get to your next step. And thank you again for being here at the Bush Library.